Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to Deconstructing with Melody. I'm your host, Melody Lococo, a national board certified health and wellness coach. Today, our guest has been a registered nurse since 2007. Her experiences as a nurse, especially as a diabetes educator, led her to wanting a deeper understanding of mindset and how it plays into our results. This led to her being professionally trained and certified by the Institute for the Psychology of Eating and the Coach firm. She offers a highly unique and results-oriented approach to eating and mindset issues that holistically integrates nutrition and psychology. She created a pathway that helps people get unstuck and connected with self-trust and inner knowing, leading them to create substantial health habits and a life they love in the process. She says, "I've always been drawn to the magic of human potential. It's what led me to nursing and guided all my steps along the way. I love to love and receive so much by caring for others. My work helps you step into the fullness of who you are. I'm all about you enjoying your life and positively impacting the world around you. I believe that a life you love is possible for you, and that the challenges around eating and body image are doorways to your greatest expansion." Let's welcome registered nurse and holistic health coach, Laura Guilmain. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here. I've been so excited to introduce our guest to you and be here to speak with Laura. We are just in the same beautiful space, and I totally believe that this is going to be so worthwhile for the listen. So, Laura, thank you so much for being here. Welcome. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you. I appreciate the warm welcome. I feel the same way. It feels very heart-centered and aligned, and I'm excited to see where this conversation goes.
Yeah, me too. Well, let's get started. Would you like to share with us a little bit about your journey before you tuned into your body's wisdom to what it looks now as you have listened and responded to yourself?
Yeah, I love that. So I have such a powerful memory. I have these snapshots of my life as a little kid. I remember lots and lots of details. And so I can really take it back to even when I was in preschool and kindergarten and just going up through grade school. And I was someone who held a lot of nervous energy in my body. I felt a lot of tension in my stomach a lot. In kindergarten, I used to ask to go home from school most days, and I truly felt physical discomfort. And looking back, it was definitely like anxiety and fear and people pleasing and just wanting to be accepted and loved. And somewhere early on, my beautiful, young childhood brain took on the message that, you are only okay if you do blank, 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 or if people think blank, blank, blank of you. And so I felt like I was constantly just taking in so much of my environment, really noticing the responses of other people and trying to self-regulate so that the easiest way to say it is just kind of people pleasing, showing up as someone who is easy for people to be around, that helped me be accepted. And I often felt like I wasn't a liar, but I was like an omitter. It was like, oh, can I share the fullness of who I am? And it definitely led to me overemphasizing the intellect. Like, I love learning and I love intelligence, and I believe that they have their rightful place in me and they're honest to who I was knitted to be. But before I got in touch with my body, I was over analyzing, over performing, needing A minus was not as really not really okay. Like an A or an A plus was okay.
Yep. Yep.
And so yeah. And so that was so much of my life. I mean, I really didn't start untangling that until I was into my 20s, and now I'm in my 30s. And so much of it just came from starting with awareness. And that's why I love that you have this emphasis. I started doing yoga and talk about getting into your body, right? I had been an athlete my whole life, cheerleading, taekwondo, field hockey, lacrosse, really pushing my body, loving nature, loving sports. And I hadn't really slowed down and tuned in. And so when I started practicing yoga, which was actually for my college gym class requirement. I did I did a yoga class, and it just started waking things up in me. I started being able to witness the tightness and grumbling and achiness in my belly and in my chest, and holding space for it and having a dialogue with it and asking questions. And that's kind of where it all began, was like, I'm not just numbing or stuffing down or pushing through my body. I'm now holding space and entering like curiosity with it. And so that's where things, and then, like, long story short, and I know we'll build upon it, I was able to merge the two. Like, I realized that my brain was beautiful, and that its curiosity and its intellect and its wisdom could be merged with the body. And that when I allowed them to be in communion with each other and dance with one another, I was able to recognize like what is true grounded intuition versus like a fear-based safety, not wanting to be embarrassed, not wanting to be rejected, so that I could learn when to embrace and when to let go.
Wow. That all of those, you said some great words like untangling and curiosity that just are intriguing me, because I mean, I feel so similar in my journey too, is just once you just start, like it feels like, because for example, you were sharing that people pleasing, which equaled acceptance to you as a child. And then we carry that with us, right? And it starts to feel like it's just so separate from ourselves and separate from our body. And then it's like, as you realize the separateness, to bring yourself like back into your body. I love that you said like that marriage of the two, and how you were able to connect that. Like, that is beautiful. And how yoga seemed to be that space. Was it yoga like in the stretching? Was it in the meditation? How did that look for you?
It was in Shavasana and rest pose. And honestly, I fell asleep sometimes. It was a 7:15 class in college. And so we would go through, and it was in that resting space when I allowed myself that conscious rest, the stillness, which they always say that Shavasana can be the hardest pose, because even in yoga, we find ways to buffer, to numb, to distract. That's why we're so often cued, where's your body? Where's your breath? Where's your mind? Because we'll leave it up to us, and we're like, oh, let me eject out of this discomfort. Let me not be here. And it was in rest where it started to come together. And so now I do, even if I don't do yoga that day, I set my phone for 10 minutes every single day, and I just do nothing. Which, like, I am such a, like, I love life, I love adventure, I love doing things. And it's like, you don't get to listen to music, you're not listening to a podcast, you're just being in stillness and like noticing, what does life feel like today in this body, and what's here for me to receive, and what's here for me to release. It's magical.
That sounds magical. And for everybody listening, that is a beautiful tool that, Laura just shared with us, that pausing tool, and takes in that space. I love that that was a step for you, because so many of us are like, okay, I've tried all of these different things. I just want to get healthy. I want to get fit. I want to look like this. I want to be like this. I want to, all of these things. And so we grab at all of the things culture has for us. And when we just take a minute and pause, and it was repetitive, right? It wasn't that you just paused for 10 minutes one day and all of a sudden everything changed for you. It was a practice, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is such a good point, because that really plays into like how do habits form in our lives? How do we create our legacy, if you will, which I think of legacy as like outcomes that we repeatedly do ultimately create the bigger picture of our lives, or the legacy of being in this life experience. And so, yeah, it's the repetition. And so often our brain, especially that primitive part of our brain, wants those fast pleasure hits. Like, let me receive some benefit from this. And if we're not getting that quick fix, which is why marketing speaks to the quick fix, because it's like
Right.
on a very biological level, we're like, I need it. But it's learning to normalize the process of repetition.
Mm.
Yeah, we like so easily forget that. I honestly remember learning how to tie my shoes. I remember sitting with my mom when she was getting ready, putting her makeup on, and I was sitting like lid down on the toilet and just like kept trying over and over. And I thought it was so hard. And I remember the joy I felt when I finally tied the bow. And I'm like, there's nothing, that's how we learn everything, is by trial and error, missteps, learning from when we almost get it, and then just going over and over. And as adults, we're not as gracious with ourselves about that process.
Yeah. I love that you shared that example. So beautiful. I always think of like a flower or a tree or any sort of plant. It starts as a seed in the earth, and it has to like go through this hard earth that has been packed down by winter, and it has to go through to be able to come up and pop through that so it can grow. And it's like we all living things start something like that, to be able to go through that challenge, to be able to grow and bloom. And I loved that example of the tying of the shoe. And I think that's why, like, as a health coach, and I know you're a coach too, like, there are so many programs out there, and people will resonate with so many different types of programs because it's speaking to certain parts of them. And maybe even if you're in our audience and listening, you've tried all these different things, and there's some things you've liked about some, and some things you have not liked, some things that have kind of worked. So you see a little glimpse of hope. And we just encourage, like, I know you too, Laura, just to hold on and just start creating these positive habits. And so for me, when I think of trying to create a new habit, I'm honestly overwhelmed and fearful, because I haven't been true to myself and been honest with myself in the past. And so because of that, it stops me. It tells me I'm not going to be able to do this. So I just don't. How do you overcome that sort of obstacle? I don't know if you faced that at all when you were trying, because you are going against your normal grain of life, and you're going and branching off to a new one. Like, how did you meet that space?
I love that. So where it started to come together for me is when I learned more about the brain, so that the process just seemed normal to me. And that was like rewriting that unhelpful belief that there was something wrong with me, right? Like, so when I learned about psychology, and I still remember my professor in college, but it was really more in my 20s when I learned about the more primitive parts of our brain that are really active in childhood before we tap into the brain power of long-term cause and effect and creative thinking and more conscious decision making. Our younger selves are really operating from what's called a motivational triad. And that's just wanting to seek pleasure, so making things have less effort, more ease to them, avoid pain, and be safe. That's like really what we're focusing on. And so wouldn't it make sense that when we were trying something new, that it would push up against that very primitive biological programming? So there's nothing going wrong, right, when it's uncomfortable. And so it's like normalizing that and helping myself see, like, this is just something that is actually meant to help you, and entering into a dialogue with your brain, which I know people think like, what do you mean talk to yourself? And it's like, guess what? You have like 65,000 thoughts a day. You're already talking to yourself. You might as well use it for your benefit and just kind of be like, I know this is uncomfortable. Like, I trust you with this discomfort. You're going to learn from it. And I love when I'm trying new things to preface it with the phrase, can I just? So it's like, even if I one day wanted to go to yoga at 6:30 in the morning and I've been waking up at 8, it's like, can I just wake up at 7:45 for the next few days and maybe just roll out of bed and do like a couple stretches and breath work, and then just keep taking it back. And then before you know it, you're awake in time to go to yoga. But so often we want a pendulum swing because we don't trust ourselves with the in between. And so when we can be more nurturing and more compassionate to ourselves and take those incremental steps, it makes the whole journey a lot more fun and we actually get to where we want to go.
Yes, I love that, compassionate in between. Like, that is beautiful. And yeah, because if I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna go at this and do it, and I'm just gonna do it here, and then I come to my coach the next week and I'm like, I didn't do it. I tried, and but I didn't know what trying fully meant until I was able to deconstruct and break the pieces down and have tiny goals. When you have tiny goals and you can succeed at one tiny goal, that might be, okay, I set my alarm clock at this time. I'm just going to set it.
Yeah.
Just set your alarm clock. Doesn't mean you have to get up, but if you just set it and let it go off and hear it, like, you've done one thing, and just practice that. Then the next thing you can decide, and you decide your steps, you decide your goals. And so, BJ Fogg had a podcast on that, tiny goals or tiny steps, and it's beautiful and just so encouraging.
It's genius because we look at the mountaintop and that's very motivating, right? Like, there's people who love challenging their bodies, their minds, their spirits with like this mountaintop goal of, the half marathons, or, having my body do this or that. And that can be so beautiful, but like, most people like don't stop and think about how like our mountaintops are achieved truly. Like, it's not just a metaphor, but it's like every single step. And so the more you can say like, I'm at this point and I'm trying to get to this mountaintop, if you will, let me break down the actionable steps so that I can take them incrementally, and then let yourself derive pleasure from them, because that speaks to that motivational triad, right? Like, we want to feel joy. So if we're beating ourselves up the whole way, it's really hard for us to keep showing up for ourselves. So can you let yourself say like, it's awesome, or that felt so good to blank, and like, let that energy, those feel good emotions course through your body. It really gives you the fuel to keep adding on to it.
Yes. Beautiful. I just feel like sitting in that for a moment, because it really takes it down. It breaks it down. It supports our body. It supports our mind. It allows us to take a moment and honor ourselves for the first step. And I think in the go, go, go culture, we just want to get to the end always. And it reminds me when I'm on vacation, I'm like, oh, I only have this many more days. I only have this. And I'm just processing that the whole time. And I'm like, just enjoy the day. So I love that you say you talked a lot about your brain and how that works. And, with those beliefs, what do you believe would be a great first belief? Like, for anyone who's on their like last straw of hope and they just need some hope right now for themselves and their body and tuning in, what would be a common affirmation or phrase that they could just start? Because I love to offer free tools, because our body is I don't want to say free, but it is a free tool that we can utilize. So even with the power of our brain, do you have any feedback there or want to share anything there?
Oh gosh, yeah. The one that came to mind and to heart as you were speaking was like, personality and habits are not fixed. Like, when we're on the last straw, we're losing our hope, and just reminding ourselves that it is not fixed. And you already gave a nature reference, and I love the way that we've evolved as a species, but sometimes it makes us forget that we are one of nature, one of creation. We aren't separate from it. And so, like you said, all of the cycles, the seasons, the growth, like, everything that is living has the objective to become its fullest expression and to go through cycles. And we are not separate from that. And so it's holding on to like, even look for it in your own life. Like, what is one way I used to do something and now I do it differently? And if you are having a hard time finding evidence, which I love you, but like, come on, search a little. I promise we all have evidence of ways that we used to do one way and now we're not. But if you're having a harder time receiving that answer, look to someone that you know, that where you've seen them make a shift, and remind yourself that you are not a fixed being in your personality. There's too much talk of like, well, this is how I am. That's where awareness is beautiful, but you don't need to get stuck in whatever your current awareness is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So reminding yourself, like, when I think about awareness, I think it's like being conscious of the presence. And a lot of time and the present moment. And a lot of times, like, there's so many cool tools, like, there's the Enneagram and then like all the different personality tests. And I think those are such beautiful ways to hold mirrors up to ourselves and give ourselves insight. But so often we like hook our identity to it. And that might not be true. Like, that might have served you, or maybe not ever served you for a certain season, but reminding yourself that from this awareness, you choose what you hold on to and you choose what you bless and release.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. How does that bless and release process look for you when you go through that? Do you want to explain like maybe a situation that has just happened that you could give us some verbiage on that?
Oh gosh, absolutely. So I love bringing it into gratitude. And I know gratitude is like such a buzzword, but gosh, it's because it's such a beautiful practice and it holds so much benefit. And so like I'll just give an example of like teaching at multiple yoga studios, and it brought like a lot of well-being into my life, but I was feeling very scattered. It was hard I felt like I was plugged into too many places, right? And so there was going to be sacrifice letting go of one of those places, right? There was a community I really loved, the values upon which the studio stands, like all of that. And so sometimes like releasing means that you're releasing some benefit from it too. But whenever I'm noticing that I'm willing to like let go and move into the next season, I hold it in gratitude. And in this situation, it was a positive thing I was letting go. But I encourage myself that even when something feels like negative, hurtful, stuck, I ask like, what is the gift here? What is the wisdom? What is the insight that I want to take with me? How is this very challenge inviting something beautiful into my life now, or creating space for it? So often when things aren't for us, we just want to like throw them away. And that energy can be, it just closes us off a bit. If we can give thanks and know that all things in our life can be used for our good, then we're able to say like, I acknowledge and give thanks for this, and I'm ready to let go and put my attention elsewhere. Yeah. So now I teach at one last yoga studio. Beautiful. And it gave so much back into my day. Like I needed that energy. Like it was draining me, unfortunately, even though that it offered so much beauty. And that's something I think that's important to recognize, that it's not just toxic things that we let go of. Sometimes it's beautiful things that have a lifespan as well. Man, powerful. There's just so many beautiful nuggets in this conversation. I just want to like take them all. And I love that you gave the example of something beautiful, but still needed to choose yourself and needing to choose what you needed. And as a recovering people pleaser myself, that is so, it can be so hard when you're trapped in that. Like there's just so much. And when you start releasing that pressure, like freedom comes. It's amazing because you can really tune way more into yourself and what you want, and hear like, oh, this is pushing me a little too far. I need to, and making those decisions. Absolutely. And learning, like going along the lines of like discomfort can be a friend, like even so often with negative emotions. We just, again, want to like toss them out. And it's beautiful to recognize where we're keeping ourselves stuck in unhelpful emotions. But when we think about, to your nature example, like the process of pressing up through the soil, I mean, when I think about if I had to do that, that sounds very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You can't see, there's not a lot of clarity, there's pressure. But something beautiful comes on the other side. And I think like something that I really love grounding myself is like, is this discomfort that's moving me forward? Or is this discomfort that's keeping me stuck? And is the discomfort for my safety, or am I using it to avoid something that's for my good? So like those orienting logical questions of recognizing like, let's not label discomfort as good or bad. Let's get more curious about the nature of it.
Yes. Oh, I love that. And it's being able to break down also, because what you're doing is like deconstructing belief systems in your mind and your past traumas or past experiences, and that child part of you that still wants to make decisions. And you said that primal, part. And so I think that is asking good questions. Like, I feel like that's what people should be paid for. Like, just ask good questions. I mean, that's what coaching is. It's like, how do we ask good questions, not with our agenda, but that encourages where the client is going and supporting them on that journey? And how can we ourselves ask ourselves those same questions?
Amen. That's like, so, because you're right. There's so many guides and teachers to support all of us on our evolution, our journey for higher consciousness and awareness. But ultimately, like the healing and the wisdom and the grounded intuition is available within us. So it's like having those guides help you like understand the brain, the body, the spirit, the integration of it all. But then you become the person who can ask yourself those questions, who can get curious, because you know your triggers, you know the emotional patterns that you get yourself into that like keep you away from what you want the most. And when you recognize that it's just your brain trying to protect you by keeping you in like a known cause and effect pattern, then you're able to like calm down and be like, there's nothing wrong with me. And so often we feel like we're pushed up against the wall and we maybe have one choice or two. And so even just keep saying like, what else? Like, is there something else I'm missing here? Is there another option that's available to me? Asking good questions and knowing that you are the ultimate guide for yourself.
Yes. Yes. I love that language, because I mean, and like I've shared on some of my other podcasts, not with you, but on other podcasts about my journey about seeing multiple counselors, feeling stuck. I've seen counselors where I felt like they had an agenda for me and I didn't want to go there. I wasn't. And it wasn't until I met my counselor now, my internal family therapist practitioner, she just lets me self-lead and allows me to hear that voice to go, I want to talk about this trauma, to nope, not ready to go there. And that is okay. I love the verbiage. Nothing is wrong with me. I can go where I need to go, explore my own terrain, my own body, and free and unburden myself in so many places that I wouldn't have had those skills to do before had I not known to trust my own self. And coming from a people pleasing and traumatic background that I have, I did not learn to trust myself. I learned to trust everybody else and their opinions of me and where I should go. And so it was really freeing to find this technique. And I feel like coaching goes so, when you have proper coaching experience and education, it goes so much with that. You lead and you support, the client leads themselves and you support them leading themselves. And so, yeah, I just think that that's huge because it builds that self-trust that so many of us have ignored for so long.
Yeah. And I think like self-trust is ultimately like the core, like the lack of it can be a core of a lot of our like confusion, cloudiness, like feeling stuck. And again, just really normalizing it. Not only, I mean, when you think about when we're first coming into the world, we're learning to like receive information from our environment, engaging with our five senses. We have teachers, coaches, caregivers, media, advertisements, you know, like the TV shows we watch, like we're learning like cause and effect from those things. And a lot of times, because our brain is still developing, we don't have as much of an ability at a younger age to tap into like, is this true for me? Like, am I responding to the present moment or something from my past? Like all those like wise questions that become more available to us in adulthood. And a lot of times, I hate to say it, but it's like the world has an agenda for us. Like,
Yep.
I mean, it just does. Even like the most beautiful parents have like hopes for us, right? They can be grounded lovingly, but and then our education system has an agenda, our purchasing patterns, like pain point response, keeping you stuck in the cycle. And so it's okay if you don't trust yourself, but I want to like support everyone in saying like, you didn't do this to yourself. Like, and there's a way through it to like untangle it using, you know, your prefrontal cortex and embodiment practices to like untangle the wires, because self-trust is available to all of us when we learn how to have more awareness and more presence, rather than outsourcing that or staying stuck in like past conditioning.
I agree. When you say embodiment, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So as someone who like really loved leaning on the intellect, like give me more information. I knew a lot, but it's almost like taking yourself from intellectual understanding to integration. That's the embodiment piece. So this can come a lot of ways for people. Like I know myself, having been like a very active, like college athlete, go. Again, like Shavasana and resting was where it started to come through for me, but I would have never just laid down and done it. So for a lot of people, like embodiment starts with conscious movement, you know, like I needed that whole yoga practice to be willing to be in stillness. Yeah. So it's like a lot of times it's hard to be able to trust the signals that our body's giving us, because they are wrapped up in patterns of fear, anxiety, shame, overwhelm, like, you know, wanting to not be rejected or abandoned. And so we need to use our awareness to get curious and notice, like, what are my triggers? What are my most common emotional states? Like, are those helping me? Are those honest? And then just moving the energy of your body around. And so I'm a yoga teacher. So like, of course I'm going to like celebrate yoga because that works a lot for me. But, you know, like my husband, he shares that when he goes mountain biking, the act of climbing up, and I mountain bike with him, but like, he just is like, the same thing happens during mountain biking, like doing the climb up the hill, like getting curious, like questioning my thoughts, noticing what's coming up, letting the, you know, vibrations go through him. And then he says, even the downhill, when the mountain's kind of like jostling him around, it's really helping him release that static energy. So then you get to a place where you can be in your body more, and you can widen the gap from the feeling space to the response space. And what I mean by that is we're so often, we get an emotion and we just want to act on it. And it's like a lot of times moving around and moving the energy in our body can help us instead get more curious about the emotion, to see like, what is the conscious action I want to take from it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm a really big fan of movement as a way to tap into embodiment. But the other thing I would love to speak to is like, when I was intensive care unit nurse, I used to, when people were coming off the ventilator and getting ready to fully breathe on their own without ventilator support, we are decreasing the settings, right? So they're doing more and more on their own, and they have this like little plastic tube in their mouth, and it can be very anxiety provoking. And we have to put their sedation down so that they're with it enough to breathe. And so even like these people aren't able to be on their mountain bike or do yoga. And so I used to sit with them and I used to like hold their hand and cue their breath and like, just encourage them that they weren't alone and like keep breathing. And so I want to really celebrate that breath is movement too, because, movement has a spectrum. And there's accessibility for all of us in different seasons. Some of us are recovering from surgery or from an injury, and doing our fullest expression of movement isn't available to us. So just that invitation to move the energy around in the body is essential. And that can just happen with breath work too.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, I feel all tooled up and ready. Yes. What a great way to explain movement and breathing. And I have found myself a lot lately, in the morning when you just like stretch and you're feeling your body and you're like, okay, I need to stretch this way. I need to stretch this way. I need to pull this. Like you're listening to the needs of your body. It can start just right there in that movement piece. And so I'll find myself like in the day, just being like, okay, like a lot of times when I put my hand here, it encourages entire movements of my body. And that's why I'm super interested in somatic therapy, because when I do that and tell myself I'm here, like my emotions, I just move through. It's like an untangling of my body in that rhythmic, just hearing the movement. And I love that because, you think you hear from your body. It feels audibly like in your mind and thoughts. But also like I hear from my body physically on what it needs. Like, oh, like my arm's holding this thing up and it needs to rest. Oh, it's getting tired. It needs to rest. So I need to put that down. How we are already listening to our body and just starting to just grab those spaces where we are and remind ourselves that we're capable and we can hear from our body. So I love that you brought in movement and yoga and mountain biking and all these things. And even those that on a ventilator, breathing and moving that way, it brings in the whole spectrum that everyone is capable of movement and hearing from their body in those ways.
Yeah, just doing a scan. And for those who are listening and not watching, we're talking about like putting our hands like kind of right in the upper chest, like right along your sternum, kind of below the base of the throat. And on a very spiritual level, like that's talked a lot about that being like our soul seat, our heart center. And so like when we're passionate, we kind of like can sometimes like put our hands right here. And I love that you brought that up, because it's almost like a cue for you to tune in and say like, what do you need? Because we override, right? Like again, even from when we were little kids, like we were told when we could have recess and when nap time was and when we could eat and all these other things. And so we're well practiced at ignoring information. And that goes into adulthood too, right? Like we have responsibilities and we can't always be like immediately responsive to the information that we receive. But even if we can carve out, I tell people like 2 minutes of like soft belly breathing, hands on your heart, one hand on your heart, one hand on your belly, and just being like, what is there to notice? Like, what is there to receive? Like, what do I need? And kind of to what you've spoken to, that like inner child piece of like letting that voice come through and learning that like you can be the provider for yourself.
Yep. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes. And my whole life was spent, someone's going to save me. I'm going to be saved. And someone and someone and someone and someone. And so I constantly look for that someone to save me. And recently being able to be like, I'm untangling my trauma. I'm being that adult that I needed at that time. I'm hearing my own story and I can provide what is needed. Like it's this revolutionary new perspective for me. And hence why I'm on this journey to find more people that have more wisdom than me, because it's just beautiful. And I started doing it naturally. Like it just naturally happened. And I'm like, is this a thing? Like, is this a thing? And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a thing. Like I have people with me. Like, so yeah, I love that we talked about that a bit, and that whole space of I'm safe, taking 2 minutes just to do this. Like I've just put my hand here, like when I'm just busy and I'll just start crying because I need that release. It just allows that space for my body to communicate what it needs, and it can be quick. I mean, we all like quick, fast, like we said, and pleasure. So it's like, okay, like what are those tools I can use right now, really quickly before my meeting to just unwind, to just hear from myself. And so, yeah.
And letting yourself feel it, right? Like we go through our day and we don't recognize those pleasureful moments, the sip of our like first glass of water or a cup of tea or that hug or someone holding the door open for us. Like our days are filled with pleasure in those little moments of connection and pause that we sometimes can just like gloss right over. And so I love, like you said, just that moment of saying like, in this moment, I'm safe. And you might be feeling uncomfortable. You might have some anxiety, some nervous anticipation, and knowing that like, I love celebrating that humans are so powerful. Like we can hold the capacity for like the spectrum of the entire emotional experience. And so being like, okay, anxiety, like, okay, discomfort, like you're with me. And this is just the way the day's going, but I welcome, comfort and safety to have a place here too, right? Yeah. So letting them merge with each other a bit.
Yeah, befriending all parts of us that show up.
Yeah, because then we're not afraid of them, right? Like we so often, I am a huge fan of joy. Like when I first started getting curious about like, what are my most common emotions? I didn't even know that I was someone who had anxiety because I was very like, I would cover it up with joy and positivity. And then I beautifully like had a guide, a teacher of mine share with me like, do you notice the thought that comes before you have that positivity and that joy? And it was often like pretty self-critical, pretty mean girl thoughts. And so learning that was underneath there and learning how to speak to that part of myself and say like, you're not in danger right now. Like it's okay to put yourself out there. It's okay if like not everyone likes you. And learning that like we are people who want community and connection, but it's a beautiful thing when you receive feedback that like certain groups aren't for you, right?
Yeah, I love this part. I keep saying that over and over. I'm just repetitive. It's
fun. It feels, because it's simple at the end of the day, right? Like we often feel so achy and like we feel this yearning for like wholeness and healed, not on this like continual like, when will I be okay, when will I be okay, and it feels so close. And that's because I want to invite that like it is work, but it is close. And like these tools, maybe someone tuning in is saying like, oh, it has to be more complex than that. Like gratitude, breathing, listening, asking questions, like if it was that easy, I would have done it already. And it's like, it's simple, but like actually creating the space to be in that, like witnessing, mindfulness, awareness, the world tries to rush us past that. So like my biggest encouragement to people is like, simple can be significant. Like this should feel like a coming home. It should feel like releasing all the complexities and really stripping it down to that love, that curiosity.
Yeah, exactly. And yes, simple and also a lot like hard work, because especially from my perspective, as I've navigated, I've had to go through and heal from trauma. I've had to release trauma and heal it and remember things that were uncomfortable that I disassociated from so long ago, which is a superpower when you're in trauma, but not one when you want to carry it every day of your life, disassociation. So it is a lot of work. And in my previous podcast episode, if those of you listening haven't heard my first episode with IFS practitioner Allison, I'd encourage you to go to that space, because she talks about parts work and therapy and how we can utilize that and ourselves within there and work through trauma and befriending all those parts of us too.
I'm so glad that you shared that. It's like The practices are simple. The application and the entering of the space is incredibly triggering at times. And it is, like you said, trauma is a part of the human experience. There's a spectrum to it, but it comes for us all in some ways at some points. And like, certainly not to minimize any of this, like I've had those crouched in a small ball, rocking back and forth, like just those moments that shake you to your core, the uninhibited like release of tears, like it's all a part of it. And like, just it is going to the root and giving yourself permission to address that trauma and to digest it. Mm-hmm. It takes a lot of courage for sure.
Yes. Yeah, it does. And it's important to do it like on your own time, but find people, reach out, find people. And that's why I do group coaching. Do you do group coaching too?
I do. Yes. I'm like changing the way that it's being offered, but I agree with you. So often people want one-on-one, and that's powerful, but I'm like, oh, the more that we can normalize this and help like healing happens in community, I'm such a fan of that.
It does. Well, I'm like finding that pond that everyone's sitting in, with the river that flows through, you can, people can all just be and just learn from everybody. And just, I've learned so much by hearing people talk, because I grab language, and it gives language to parts of me that didn't have that language, and learning and seeing other people and knowing I'm in this with others and I'm not alone. Something beautiful happens in community. And it's revolutionary how when we're with other people, how things can to spark and light up in us.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's like, of course that would make sense, right? Like we are biologically hardwired to like connect, right? To be a part of a community, to feel as though we are okay and that we're not rejected or abandoned. And so it would make sense to want to witness that and be in it with others. And the beautiful part about group coaching or group spaces is that when you have a leader or facilitator who allows for there to be like a normalization of the process, but helps the group not get stuck in trauma bonding, right? So it's like this beautiful, like, here we are together and we are going to move forward with our story and know that we don't need to stay stuck in the trauma, if that makes sense,
Yeah. Let's move through it together. That like so important. Well, this has been such a beautiful conversation, wonderful time for me, and on behalf of the audience too. Like, I know we all are I'm feeling grateful and gratitude for sure. So what are you working on right now that you would like to share? Any support that, you have to offer for the audience thinking or questioning, or if they resonate with you?
Yeah, I love that. And I love this conversation too. It's been so fun. It like unfolded in exactly how it should have. And it's like surprised and delighted me. So thank you for facilitating it. And yes, I am building like my group offerings. I do one-on-one and I love it, but I agree, like my deepest healing has happened in community. And so often, especially unfortunately in today's society, we're seeing like a creation of the other, a separation at times, that more like cancel culture. Like, so I love the idea of like integrating and finding the common thread that we have, even as we're on our own journeys. Yes. So I am a nurse and I do life coaching, but I also like where I really tune in is taking all this work through the lens of food and body image. So it's funny because a lot of people come to me because they don't like the habits that they have around the way that they eat or the way that they inhabit their body or their relationship with movement, all that kind of stuff. They come to me for very tangibles. And I'm all here for it. Sometimes people know like the food and the body is a doorway to like those deeper soul lessons of agreeing to be here and to embracing the discomfort and believing that it's all for our good and learning how to fuel our body, mind, and spirit in a way that feels good.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I love it. And so my group coaching, it's a 4-month program. And I love that because it kind of takes, I'm not about like you'll get your pleasure hits at the beginning. Like I set it up so that you feel like, oh, I'm getting all these like quick wins. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling motivated. But it takes the pressure off of like this more like boot camp style thing. And it's more like, let's soften into it and witness and be there for others. And what I love is some people, they are totally fine with the shape that they're in or like the clothes that they wear, but it feels stressful. It feels hard. They feel like they're at war with their body or that there's a struggle or they don't know how to fuel themselves for good energy levels. Other people have been yo-yo dieting or, just really wrapped up in diet culture. Some people want to lose weight. And then what I love about my group is that there's room for everyone. And I really create a container where it's not like, it doesn't matter if the person on the call with you has like a slightly different outcome that they're going for. Like we all get to know our why, know where we want to go and be grounded in it and learn to celebrate other people's journeys and know that we can receive, right? So that is what I do. It's a mindset-based process. So there's lots of tangibles on how to like fuel and move and creating a way of being and habits that work for you. But it's all wrapped in the container of understanding like brain science and how we use the mindset to support us rather than derail us. So I have a fun last name, but my website is lauraguilmain.com and GUILMAIN. I'm Laura_Guilmain on Instagram, and I love supporting people through my DMs. So if you felt like this was something that you have a question for me, just pop over there and we can chat. I love it.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much. And I'll also have your information in the show notes so anyone can click any of the links to get to you quickly. Because I know there's going to be lots of people that want to connect with you. This has been beautiful, and what you offer our earth and our world and just creation of all of us in general is just beautiful. So thank you for doing that good work so that others can resonate and hear from your story and know that it's true for us too. Like that's why it's so important to hear other stories, because Danette May once told me, she's like, it's just spiritual driftwood when you see someone else doing that. Like, just know you can do it too.
Oh, I love that. It's like sometimes we can witness it in our own lives, and sometimes seeing someone else do it like takes the impossible and makes us feel like there is hope.
Yeah. So I hope everyone listening can tune into that and just know that it is possible. So great. This is beautiful. And thanks for sharing and being a part of my journey and our journey for those listening.
I love what you're doing. And I know are in such alignment, and I'm so grateful for the people who find their way to you. And thank you so much for everything that you're doing too. It's a joy to contribute a little bit to all the beauty that you're pouring out into the world. So thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here. Hey, thanks for tuning in. If this episode encouraged you or supported you along your journey, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel because we have so many wonderful and free tools just for you.